She didn't come back to stay. She came to make sure he'd never follow. 9 months ago, Anya Shell had walked out of the most fortified private residence in New Orleans with one carry-on bag, $43 in her coat pocket, and a secret she hadn't yet named. Today, she was standing in the marble lobby of the Stirling Group's headquarters on Poydras Street, holding a manila envelope and a belly so large she'd had to angle herself sideways through the revolving door. The receptionist, a young woman with a headset and the particular stillness of someone trained to show no reaction, looked up from her desk. Her eyes traveled to Anya's stomach. Her fingers went immediately to her earpiece. "I need to see Stirling," Anya said. Her voice was flat. She'd practiced flat for 9 months. Flat didn't invite conversation. Flat didn't invite pity. "Tell him Anya is in the lobby. He'll know the last name." The receptionist's composure fractured by approximately 2 millimeters. Just enough. She turned her face away and whispered into her mic. Anya stood in the center of the lobby and waited. The marble floor was cold even through the soles of her worn canvas shoes. She'd bought them at a thrift store in Baton Rouge 4 months ago when her feet had swollen past the size of every pair she owned. She could feel the baby pressing low and heavy against her pelvis. A constant grinding weight that had made the 2-hour bus ride here feel like a crossing of continents. She rested one hand on the top of her stomach, force of habit. Just this one thing, she thought, then we're done. The envelope in her other hand contained 2 documents. The first, a formal petition for dissolution of marriage, already signed by Anya on pages 3 and 7. The second, a voluntary termination of parental rights form, requiring Stirling's signature and a notary. She'd had it drawn up by a legal aid attorney in Baton Rouge, who had looked at her stomach, then at her face, then very carefully not asked any of the obvious questions. Stirling didn't need to know about the child. That was the plan she'd built the last 9 months around, layered brick by brick until it felt solid enough to stand on. She would come. She would get the signatures. She would leave. The child would grow up without the weight of its father's last name, pressing down on its chest like a stone. She'd timed this badly. She knew that now, standing here with her center of gravity somewhere around her knees and her lower back screaming, her due date was 11 days away. But the legal aid attorney had told her the filing window would close in 2 weeks, and Anya had spent the better part of a year learning that windows, once shut, did not reopen. The elevator at the far end of the lobby opened. A man stepped out, not Stirling, his head of security, Beau, tall, with a jaw like a cinder block and eyes that processed everything in the room within the first second of entering it. He saw her. His stride didn't break, but his hand dropped half an inch toward his jacket before he visibly stopped himself. "Mrs. Stirling." His voice was a carefully controlled nothing. "Mrs. Shell," she corrected. Beau's mouth pressed into a thin line. He looked at her stomach the way everyone had looked at her stomach today, like it was a grenade they were trying to determine the pin status of. "He's asking you to come up." "I'm sure he is." The executive floor smelled like she remembered. Old wood, climate-controlled air, and underneath it all, the faint mineral ghost of the river 2 blocks west. Anya had always been good at cataloging smells. It was the kind of detail you noticed when you were trying to memorize a place you knew you'd be leaving. She followed Beau down the corridor. Her footsteps were slower than she'd have liked. The baby was sitting on her sciatic nerve and had been since Tuesday. Beau stopped in front of the heavy double doors at the end of the hall. He didn't knock. He just looked at her, something complicated moving behind his eyes, and then stepped aside. Anya pushed open the door herself. Stirling was standing at the window with his back to the room. She had forgotten how still he could be, not the stillness of a man at rest, the stillness of a man who had decided, a very long time ago, that no motion would be made without a calculated reason. He was in a dark suit, no tie, his hands were clasped behind his back. He was watching the street below. "Close the door," he said. She did. "Sit down, Anya." "I'll stand." She crossed to the desk and set the manila envelope on the clean surface. "I need 2 signatures, pages 4 and 9 in the first document, page 2 in the second. There's a notary in the lobby who can. 9 months. He said it to the window, still hadn't turned around. Yes. 9 months and you walk back through my door. He paused. I want to know why today. Because the filing window closes in. I know what a filing window is. His voice was quiet. That particular quiet she'd learned to read like weather, the kind that came before something broke. I want to know why you came here in person instead of having a lawyer serve me. I was advised that personal service would expedite. Anya. She stopped. He finally turned around. Caden Stirling was 41 years old, with a face that had been lived in hard. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, faint now but permanent. His hair was darker than she remembered, or maybe the light in here was different. His eyes were the color of old iron, and they were... He stopped looking at her face. His gaze dropped. The room went very quiet. She watched him process it. She'd thought about this moment in the abstract for 9 months, prepared clinical responses, steeled herself against whatever reaction he'd have. She had not actually prepared for what happened to his face. The calculating stillness he wore like a second skin simply stopped. Something moved behind his eyes that she had never seen there before, not once in 14 months of marriage. His chest rose on a breath that didn't complete itself. The pen he'd been holding, she hadn't even noticed it was in his hand, hit the desk with a sharp crack. How far, he said. The words sounded like they cost him something. 38 weeks. The number visibly landed. She could see him doing the arithmetic the same way she had 9 months ago in a bathroom in Baton Rouge with a gas station test, sitting on the edge of a motel tub and watching the lines appear while her hands shook. Sit down, he said again. Different tone now, not a command, something she didn't have a name for. I don't want to sit down, I want your signature on. Anya. He came around the desk. He moved the way he always moved, like every step was intentional and unhurried, and it had always done something she resented to her nervous system, that walk of his. He stopped 3 feet from her. His eyes moved over her face first, the circles under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth, and then back down. You look like you haven't slept in a month. Sign the papers. No. She felt her breath stall. Excuse me. I said no. He reached out and picked up the envelope from the desk without opening it. He held it in both hands for a moment. Then he set it down on the far edge of the desk, beyond her reach. Sit down before you fall down. You're white as chalk. I'm always. You're not. His jaw was tight. Bo, get Dr. Sawyer up here. He'd raised his voice just enough that it carried through the door, which meant Bo had been standing exactly where she'd have predicted, on the other side. I don't need a doctor, I need. You need to stop standing, Stirling said, and there was something frayed at the edge of his voice now, something she'd never heard from him before. Please. That word from Caden Stirling's mouth was strange enough that she sat down. He dragged a second chair close to hers, not behind the desk, not across from it, beside it. He sat down the way men with old injuries sat, favoring his right side. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at her, and the iron in his eyes was doing something she couldn't classify. Whose, he said. Don't. I need to hear you say it. She looked at the window, at the grey October sky over the river. Yours, she said, obviously yours. The breath he exhaled was not controlled at all. She turned to look at him. He had put one hand over his mouth and was staring at the floor. The knuckle of his index finger pressed white against his lip. His shoulders were rigid. Every inch of Caden Stirling's considerable composure was engaged in holding itself together. Anya had not expected this. She had expected cold fury or icy negotiation, or the particular brand of distant authority he used when he wanted to remind you that he made decisions and you accommodated them. She had not expected this. She had not expected his hand to move. It reached toward her, slow enough that she could have stopped it. He placed his palm against the side of her stomach. His hand was large and warm, and she felt the contact through the wool of her coat. and then the baby moved. A long, rolling shift, an elbow or a knee dragging across the inside of her belly, and his hand went absolutely still. His eyes came up to hers. "That's—" "Yes," she said. He didn't move his hand. He was staring at her stomach with an expression she had no architecture for. This man had run one of the most efficient criminal operations on the Gulf Coast for 15 years. He had bought politicians and broken shipping contracts and made exactly 2 facial expressions in her presence: calculated neutrality and cold displeasure. He looked like a man who had just heard a sound he'd given up on ever hearing. "Why did you run?" he said, still quiet, still watching his hand on her stomach. "You know why. I know what you think you saw." She went still. "I saw you on the phone. I heard what you said." "You heard half of what I said." "You said," and I quote, she had rehearsed this. She'd rehearsed it standing in the shower of the motel bathroom in Baton Rouge for 9 months. "Handle the whole family. No witnesses. I don't care how you do it. Just make sure it's clean." She looked at him. "That's what you said, Stirling. I was standing in the hall." "And the call before that one?" She paused. "The call you didn't hear," he continued, his voice steady, "was from our corporate lawyer informing me that the Trevane family had filed a lawsuit that would expose 6 of our shell companies if it went to trial. Handle the whole family meant settle with all 4 of them, including the 2 adult children who were named as co-plaintiffs. No witnesses meant no depositions. Clean meant no press." He looked at her. "It was a civil litigation call, Anya." The lobby of her chest went hollow. "You ran," he said, "from a conference call with my attorney." She opened her mouth, closed it. The floor of 9 months of certainty shifted in a way that made her grab the arm of the chair. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. No, his hand was still on her stomach. "You didn't ask." She wanted to argue. She wanted to defend the logic that had seemed airtight in the motel room, the math of it. Danger, plus pregnant, plus alone equals run. She had been so certain. She had built an entire life on that certainty, brick by terrible brick. "You were all ready," she gestured at herself. "I found out 2 days after. I couldn't think straight. The warehouse on Decatur had been bombed the week before. There were men with guns in the downstairs office. I was scared and I wasn't thinking." "I know," he said. "I know you were scared." "Don't be reasonable right now," she said, and her voice cracked. "I need you to yell at me so I can stay angry." Something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile. The corner of his mouth moved 0.5 millimeter. "Tell me where you've been living," he said instead. She hesitated. "Baton Rouge." "Doing what?" "Night shift bookkeeping. Payroll processing for a restaurant group." His jaw tightened. The hand on her stomach didn't move. "You've been doing restaurant payroll for 9 months. The benefits were adequate." "Anya." "They had dental." He closed his eyes briefly, like a man absorbing a blow he'd chosen to take without blocking. When he opened them, the iron was still there, but it had changed temperature. "You have been living in Baton Rouge, doing restaurant payroll, for 9 months. While—" He stopped himself, looked at his hand. "While my child was." "My child," she said, reflexive. "Ours." He said it flat and final, like he was closing a ledger. "You don't get to run away and claim solo ownership of something we made together. That's not how the accounting works." She stared at him. "Did you just use an accounting metaphor at me?" "I use what works." He withdrew his hand from her stomach, slowly, the way you withdrew your hand from something warm when you weren't ready to. He stood, walked to his desk, and picked up the phone. 2 words, "Get Sawyer." Dr. Sawyer arrived in 11 minutes, a compact woman in her 60s with a physician's measured calm and a portable ultrasound unit that she set up on the low table by the office window without asking any questions about the circumstances. She unpacked gel and a wand and directed Anya to recline in the chair with a folded towel behind her back. Anya had not been to a doctor in 3 months. The clinic wait times in Baton Rouge had been long, and she'd been careful with what she spent, and she'd told herself the baby was fine. She'd know if something was wrong. She'd told herself that with the particular conviction of someone who knew they were probably lying. The wand moved across her stomach. The screen clarified. A curved spine, a rib cage, the unmistakable profile of a face with its mouth slightly open, already working at something, already ready. And then the sound. Rapid, rhythmic, strong, a small engine running exactly the way it was supposed to run. Stirling was standing to Anya's left. He'd positioned himself there without comment, and she hadn't told him to move. When the heartbeat filled the room, she heard the faint catch in his breath. She looked at him. He was staring at the screen with the expression of a man who had done a great deal of damage over the course of his life and understood, in that moment, with some precision, what it was that all that damage had been protecting. "Strong rate," Dr. Sawyer said, 142. "Good fluid levels. Baby's measuring right on schedule." She tilted her head at the screen. "Head is engaged. This little one is ready." She looked at Anya. "When is your due date?" 11 days. Could be sooner. A pause. "You're showing early signs of pre-labor. I'd like you off your feet and resting. No stairs, no stress, high protein." She glanced over her shoulder at Stirling, who received the instruction with a single nod. "I'll check back tomorrow morning. Call me the moment anything changes." She packed up efficiently. She left. The door clicked shut. Stirling pulled his chair around the desk and sat down beside Anya's, close enough that their knees were almost touching. He leaned forward, forearms on his thighs. He looked at her the way he looked at a balance sheet when something wasn't reconciling. "You came here today," he said slowly, "to get me to sign away my parental rights." "Yes." "Because you thought I ordered a hit on a civilian family." She said nothing. "And when you realized that might have been wrong," he watched her face. "How long ago did you realize?" She looked at the window. The river was a dark seam in the distance. "About 4 minutes ago." He was quiet for a moment, then 9 months in Baton Rouge. It was an apartment, the last 4 months. "How much were you paying?" "Stirling." "How much?" "Enough." He moved his jaw. "I had men looking for you for 6 months. After that, the trail was clean. You did good work. The payroll accounting background helps." The ghost of that not quite smile again. Then it faded. "You were protecting the baby. From my world." "Yes." "And now?" She exhaled. This was the conversation she hadn't built scripts for, because she hadn't anticipated arriving at it through a civil litigation misunderstanding. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I came here with a plan. The plan was straightforward. The plan had me signing away my child." "Yes." "That plan is dead." I noticed. He reached out and picked up the manila envelope. He didn't tear it. No dramatics, no display. He simply opened the side drawer of his desk, placed it inside and closed the drawer, final, like a ledger entry. "What would it take," he said carefully, "for you to stay?" She looked at him. The exhaustion of the past 9 months was sitting on her chest like a stack of ledger books. Her back hurt. The baby was pressing on her bladder. She had $47 in her checking account, and the man who had terrified her most in the world was sitting 3 feet away looking at her, like she was the only column in his books that had ever failed to balance. "It's not one thing," she said. "I know how negotiations work." "It's not a negotiation, it's conditions." She straightened in the chair. The baby rolled, a slow internal tide. "If I stay, then the violence stops crossing the threshold. Anything that happens in your world stays in your world, not in this house, not in front of this child." He nodded once. "I have access to the books, real books, not the shell accounts. I need to know where the money comes from and where it goes, because I am not raising a child in money I can't account for." A longer pause. "That's a significant exposure." "Those are the terms." He studied her for a moment. "And the third thing. You tell me every time there's a risk. You don't decide alone what I need to know to keep us safe. You made that mistake once, and I disappeared 9 months." She met his eyes. "I have very good follow-through, Stirling." He was quiet long enough that she could hear the old clock on the bookshelf marking seconds. "Yes," he said. She felt something loosen in her chest, small, cautious, not trust yet. That would take longer than one afternoon, but the first molecule of it. "I'm not the woman who left," she said. "I know." He reached across the space between their chairs and rested his hand on her knee, not possessive, not claiming, just present. "I'm not the same man either. I haven't verified that yet." "I know that too." He stood. "We're going to the house. Sawyer wants you off your feet. We can negotiate the remaining terms once you've slept somewhere with functioning heat." She opened her mouth to protest. The baby chose that exact moment to deliver a sharp kick upward into her diaphragm, and the breath she'd been assembling for an argument came out as a sharp exhale instead. Stirling's hand was at her elbow immediately. "Can you stand?" "I can stand. I've been standing for." She stood and her lower back seized in a way that made her grip his forearm. "Fine. Yes. The heat would be good." He kept his hand at her elbow the entire way to the elevator. The house was the same. River stone and old cypress, set back from the road behind a wrought iron gate that knew her face from the security cameras. Mrs. Garland, who had run the household since before Anya's time, opened the front door before they reached the top step. The older woman looked at Anya, then at Anya's stomach. Her entire body seemed to exhale. She did not say a word. She simply held the door wider and turned toward the kitchen. The ground floor room was turned down with clean sheets that smelled like cedar. A glass of water and a plate of toast were on the nightstand before Anya had finished lowering herself onto the edge of the mattress. "I didn't tell you to get comfortable," she said to the room, which felt too much like an admission. Stirling sat in the chair by the window. "I know. I'm still deciding. You're in my house eating my toast." She picked up a piece of toast. "I'm keeping my options open." The ghost smile came back, fuller this time. It changed his face in a way she hadn't let herself remember for 9 months. It was 2 a.m. when she woke to a pain that was not the familiar grinding ache of late pregnancy. This was different. A tightening that started in her lower back and wrapped around her middle like a fist, slowly closing, held for 30 seconds, then released. She lay still, counted, breathed through the next one. The third one made her sit up. She did not panic. She was a woman who had processed payroll for 600 restaurant employees on a night shift schedule while 38 weeks pregnant. She was acquainted with completing tasks under duress. She texted Dr. Sawyer first. Then she sat at the edge of the mattress and breathed through contraction number 4 and thought, with some clarity, that 11 days had been optimistic. The bedroom door opened without a knock. Stirling stood in the doorway in a dark shirt, and the particular wide-awake stillness of a man who had not been asleep. She suspected he had not slept at all. He looked at her face. "Now." "Sawyer's on her way. 15 minutes. Another wave began its slow cinching arc around her midsection. She gripped the edge of the mattress and exhaled through it deliberately. "It's fine. First labors are long. We have time." He crossed the room and sat beside her on the edge of the bed. He didn't say anything. He placed his hand on her back. Between her shoulder blades, the heel of his palm pressed flat, steady, warm, an anchor in the middle of her spine. She breathed. She hadn't expected that to help. It helped. Dr. Sawyer arrived in 13 minutes and converted the guest room into something efficient and calm. The monitoring was continuous. She spoke to Anya directly throughout in a tone that treated her as someone capable of managing her own labor with accurate information. She explained every development as it happened, the progress, the timing, what to expect in each stage, the exact moment she called for the pediatric nurse she'd brought on standby for a baby arriving slightly ahead of schedule. Anya appreciated this more than she could say. The hours moved in their particular way, slow between contractions, compressed during them. Stirling did not leave. He did not pace. He sat where she could see him and spoke when she wanted him to, and was quiet when she didn't. When she told him, around 4 a.m., that she had changed her mind and he could leave, he said, "No, with the same finality he'd used on the parental rights paperwork, and she lacked the energy to argue. When she told him, around 5 a.m., that she was genuinely terrified, he moved from the chair to beside her on the bed and said, "I know, me too," which was the most honest thing she had ever heard him say. The baby arrived at 6:17 a.m. with a cry like a small, furious argument with the world she'd just entered. Dr. Sawyer placed her on Anya's chest, warm, astonishing, real. Anya had known, abstractly, that the baby would be real. She had done the math every day for 9 months, had bought second-hand onesies and folded them carefully into a backpack, and made every rational preparation for a human being arriving. She had not, somehow, accounted for the full specific weight of an actual person, this particular person, breathing against her collarbone and already searching with blind determination for what she needed. Stirling was standing at the side of the bed. He hadn't moved in 20 minutes. He was looking at his daughter with the expression Anya would spend years afterward finding words for. A man who had spent his entire adult life calculating the cost of everything, suddenly in the presence of the one thing he could not reduce to an equation. "She's early," Anya said. "Sawyer says she's healthy, all the measurements." "I know. I was there." Anya looked at her daughter, dark hair, an expression of profound irritation at the general situation, already familiar. "She has your frown." Stirling's hand came up to rest on the side of the baby's head, careful, almost hesitant. The largest set of knuckles Anya had ever seen, curled around a skull the size of a grapefruit. "What are we calling her?" he said. His voice was quiet in the early morning room. Anya thought about the list she'd made in the motel. The names she'd written and crossed out over 9 months, never quite landing on any of them, as if naming the baby would make the future too concrete to control. "I'll tell you," she said, "when I've decided what I'm staying for." Stirling looked at her over their daughter's head. There was no cold in it this time, no calculation, no distance. Just a man at the far end of a very long road, looking back at the person who had walked the same distance from the other direction. "I already told you I can't do normal," he said. "I'm not asking for normal." She shifted the baby higher on her chest. Her daughter yawned catastrophically small and closed her eyes. "I'm asking for honest, every time, whatever it costs." He pulled the chair from the wall to the side of the bed and sat down, forearm resting on the mattress beside her, close enough. "Every time," he said. She nodded once. She looked back at her daughter. She thought about 9 months of certainty, built on $43 and a misheard conversation. She thought about a man who kept ledgers in his head for 15 years and couldn't make a single one of them balance, and now was sitting at her elbow with an expression that said the accounting had changed completely. She thought, this is not the ending I planned for. She thought, the plans I make under duress have a poor track record. "Margot," she said, not the name she'd planned. The name that arrived now in this room, with the river going grey outside the window and the morning beginning without fanfare or permission. "Her name is Margot." Stirling said nothing. He turned the name over, clearly. Then he nodded. He reached out and tucked the edge of the blanket more firmly around his daughter's shoulder. Anya let him.